Some people didn't hurt you unintentionally, they chose to. Hurting you was pleasure, it was power, it was shadow. And the cruelest part? You believed it was weakness, when in fact it was control. Carl Jung said that what we hate in others is just a reflection of what we deny in ourselves. And that's why your kindness bothered, your loyalty hurt, your vulnerability became a threat. They didn't want to destroy you. They wanted to destroy the mirror you represented. If this truth has already burned on your skin, then I'll tell you now bluntly, subscribe to the channel, because no one here will offer you anesthesia. You won't find cheap comfort here. Here you will bleed for the right words. And if you continue, you will discover that silence can be more brutal than any scream, and that dignity begins when you stop begging for love. Make no mistake, some people don't stumble upon you by accident, they choose to crush you. Their pleasure isn't casual, it's ritual. There's a secret joy in watching you bleed inside, in ripping from your skin the feeling that you still have control. Carl Jung said that the shadow is the face we can't bear to see. And it's precisely this shadow that overflows when someone finds pleasure in your suffering. It's not weakness, it's distorted power. It's inverted spirituality, where the unconscious becomes a weapon, where trauma becomes fertilizer for the sick ego. They don't want dialogue, they want a spectacle. They want to see in your face the reflection of the very wound they never dared to touch. And while you believe that no one can be that cruel, they're already smiling inside because they know your innocence is the perfect stage to play out their fantasy of control. The blow rarely comes head-on, it comes silently. It comes in a word cut in half, in calculated irony, in strategic abandon. They know where to poke. They know where your wound lies. It's not coincidence, it's surgical precision. It's the pleasure of being God in someone else's unconscious. And every time you swallow hard, they feel the perverse ecstasy of being alive. This game isn't human, it's psychic. It's shadow feeding on shadow. It's trauma transformed into poison that needs a sensitive body to circulate. You weren't chosen by chance. You were chosen because you still believe in the desire to heal, because your vulnerability is nourishment, because your exposed spirituality disturbs those who only know how to survive in the dark. Those who have lost themselves in the unconscious only find importance when they make others lose themselves too. And that's the dirty secret. They don't attack your weakness, they attack your light. Want to see an accurate portrayal of this mechanism? Look at the relationships in which love and violence mix, the kiss that follows the slap, the affection that arrives immediately after humiliation. This isn't a contradiction, it's a method. It's intermittent reinforcement. It's dopamine mixed with pain. It's spirituality hijacked to sustain an illusion of love. What you call forgiveness, they call a license to repeat. What you believe to be empathy, they read as submission. They don't make mistakes unintentionally. They calculate, they don't lose control. They find control precisely when you lose yours. And what stings the most? It's not the attack itself. It's realizing that the wound was used as theater, that the trauma became a spectacle, that their unconscious wrote a script where you never had a choice. And yet, this is just the first mirror. Because if you dare to look at the reflection, you'll discover that their pleasure reveals something much more brutal, the shame they try to crush in silence. Have you ever noticed how your kindness irritates those trapped in their own shadow? It's not because you make mistakes, it's because you get it right. It's not because you're weak, it's because you dare to be vulnerable. This vulnerability acts as a mirror that doesn't lie. Carl Jung taught us that what we can't stand in ourselves is what we hate most in others. And that's why your loyalty hurts those who only know betrayal. When you love cleanly, those who are only wounded see it as a threat. Their trauma can't bear the reflection of your integrity. The spirituality you carry, even in silence, exposes the illusion they've built to survive. They don't hate you. They hate what you awaken, what you remember, what you show without saying a word. It is in this reflex that shame arises. The kindness you offer without charge reveals their fantasy that they will never be good enough. Your presence, pure and firm, lays bare their unconscious, and it is there that their masks begin to crack. They don't attack you because you are fragile. They attack you because you remind them of what they lost. The smile you give hurts more than 1,000 insults because it reminds them of what their childhood stole. The hug you insist on offering is a dagger because it recalls the warmth they never had. Your desire to heal becomes condemnation because their shadow screams, "I can't have that." It's not rational, it's visceral. And in this viscerality, the impulse to hurt you is born, not because you deserve it, but because you are a living witness to what they buried beneath the trauma. Think about the relationships in which you gave everything: patience, listening, forgiveness. Instead of recognition, you received coldness. Instead of gratitude, you received contempt. Why? Because the more you offered, the more they saw reflected the abyss of their own inability to love. Your light became a beacon that exposed their darkness, and the shadow cannot bear to be exposed. So what do? They try to break the mirror. They try to transform your loyalty into weakness, your kindness into burden, your vulnerability into a motive for attack. It's as if your every gesture is a silent sentence against the illusion that sustains their lives. And in this reflection, shame doesn't invite them to change. It incites them to destroy. But in the silence between these attacks, something deeper begins to escape. Something uncontrollable, something that comes from the cracks of unconscious repression. The shadow never dies of hunger. When repressed, it seeps into corners, escapes through the cracks of silence, contaminates the simplest gestures. Carl Jung said that what is not made conscious returns as destiny, and it is in this return that brutality resides. Those who do not address their own trauma end up unleashing upon others the violence they should direct inward. They don't scream because they want to. They scream because they can't bear the echo that the unconscious whispers when the light goes out. Their silence isn't empty, it's prison. It's the captivity where accumulated anger turns into manipulation. And guess who pays the bill? You, the one who offers the most love, who most believes in the illusion that patience can heal. Unconscious repression doesn't present itself as a clear confession. It oozes out in disguise, a scathing critique that destroys in seconds what you spent weeks building, a strategic disappearance that leaves you suspended, a touch of affection that quickly turns into a courtship. This is how their fantasy is sustained. They create a cruel dance where you never know if you're being loved or punished. It's not an accident, it's a pattern. Their unconscious needs to find outlet, and you are the most fertile ground because you offer so much forgiveness. Their desire to avoid facing the trauma becomes a compulsion to make you feel the same hole. Their spirituality is sequestered, trapped in the shadow that flees the mirror, but never fails to find an innocent body to occupy. If you want to see this in practice, observe the moments when someone explodes disproportionately over the smallest things. It's not about the misplaced towel. It's not about the crossed word. It's about the old wound that had nowhere to bleed. And since repression doesn't know how to die, it finds an outlet in the other. You become a vessel for a poison that wasn't yours. This is how the shadow escapes. Not in honest confessions, but in camouflaged aggression. Not in dialogue, but in punitive silences. Not in healing, but in repetition. It's the trauma reenacting itself, as if your every gesture were a stage for the play they never wanted to see. But here lies an even more brutal detail. Their shadow can only dance because you insist on remaining trapped in the captivity of loyalty. Your loyalty isn't a virtue here, it's a prison. You give yourself completely, and the other only learns to consume you. You forgive, and that becomes permission. You endure, and that becomes an invitation for more violence. Carl Jung once said that the shadow distorts everything it touches, and in the other's unconscious, your kindness isn't proof of love. It's a sign of weakness. You believe that if you love enough, if you're faithful, if you continue to carry a cross that isn't yours, one day you'll be recognized. Lie, that never happens. The other doesn't want your healing, they want your sacrifice. They want the feeling of power that arises every time you swallow your pain in silence. And every time you believe that being good enough will change the game, you only reinforce the chain that binds you. The cycle is predictable. You give, they take. You explain, they distort. You cry, they use it against you. What you call loyalty, they call a guarantee they can keep destroying you without losing anything. It's a brutal psychic economy. Your pain is their profit. It's like this in abusive marriages, where your partner swears they'll change after the next outburst. It's like this in toxic jobs, where you accept overwork without ever receiving recognition. It's like this in unhealthy families, where your job is to carry guilt that was never yours. This repetition isn't accidental. It's scripted. It's childhood trauma translated into adulthood, believing that only by being useful, only by being perfect, only by giving your all will you be loved. But that's a lie. It's just the shadow repeating the pattern. Want to see the ultimate cruelty? It's when you start blaming yourself for not being even more loyal. You bleed and think, maybe I didn't do enough. You're humiliated and respond, maybe I need to be more patient. This is captivity. It's not an iron chain, it's a psychological chain. And the more you insist, the more the other person feeds. The logic is simple. Those who thrive on your submission have no interest in your freedom. They don't want true love. They want domination. They want to look at you and know that even if they destroy you, you still remain. This is the cruelest prison. You hold the handcuffs yourself, believing they are gold bracelets. And until you realize that your loyalty has turned to poison, you will continue to be fed in a game where only one wins, and it's never you. But this prison has an even more insidious mechanism, manipulation, which mixes pain and pleasure until you lose track of who you are. Manipulation doesn't arrive screaming. It disguises itself as care, attention, affection. It enters silently, like someone bringing flowers, but hides blades within the bouquet. Carl Jung said that the unconscious reveals itself in repeating patterns, and there is no pattern more destructive than this. The calculated alternation between love and rejection. This is what keeps you trapped. This is what poisons your perception until you confuse pain with desire. Today they put you at the top. Tomorrow they bury you in the ground. Today you are the chosen one. Tomorrow you are disposable. This cycle is not a mistake, it is psychic engineering. They know that trauma creates dependency, that the shadow feeds on your need for validation. And so, like an addict, you accept the humiliation because you believe in the reward that comes soon after. It's not love, it's chemistry. It's dopamine that explodes when affection arrives after the wound. It's spirituality hijacked by the unconscious, transformed into illusion, into a cheap fantasy that seems like connection but is only an invisible chain tightening around your neck. The poison is served in measured doses. Intermittent reinforcement is the most addictive drug ever created. One day you get attention, the next you get silence. One day you're exalted, the next you're reduced to dust. It's like a slot machine. You never know when you'll win, but the uncertainty keeps you trapped because the fantasy that you can change numbs you. And it's in this space that manipulation flourishes. They know that the more unstable, the more controlled you become. They know that the more you invest, the harder it becomes to quit. And you keep going believing that next time will be the right time, that one last effort will fix everything. But there is no fix. There is repetition. There is a desire for dominance. There is a shadow wanting to keep you as an object of power. Their unconscious doesn't want balance. It wants chaos, because in chaos you beg, you bow, you give in, and in this place they reign. See how the mechanism repeats itself. They hurt you, then embrace you. They destroy you, then tell you you're all they have. They humiliate you in public, then apologize privately, crying, promising change. This is the script. This is the formula. This is the prison. You know you're being manipulated, but you remain trapped because dependence isn't rational. It's biological, it's psychic, it's spiritual. It's a shadow disguised as love. And you, thirsting for belonging, mistake prison for connection. The poison of manipulation doesn't kill you all at once. It poisons you slowly, drop by drop, until you doubt your own sanity. And when you try to escape, your body demands another dose of the same poison. This is the cruelest part. Manipulation not only destroys your trust in others, it destroys your trust in yourself. And yet, the most disturbing thing is realizing that this cycle wasn't born today. It has ancient roots, planted far back in the script inherited from childhood, that invisible script that shaped the way you love and how you allow yourself to be loved. No destructive cycle arises out of nowhere. It has roots, and almost always those roots are embedded in childhood. Carl Jung said that what is unresolved in childhood returns as destiny in adulthood. What does this mean? That the humiliations, the abandonments, the heavy silences of childhood don't disappear. They settle in the unconscious and write an invisible script. And you grow up believing that love is something earned through sacrifice, that affection is a rare currency that only arrives after pain. This is how the desire to be loved mixes with the illusion that you must carry guilt that wasn't yours. The shadow is born there. When the hug didn't come, when the look was denied, when affection only appeared as a reward for perfect behavior. And in adulthood, without realizing it, you repeat it. You give too much of yourself, accept too much, endure too much, because you learned early on that love is conditional, always a prize, never a right. This script inherited from childhood isn't just memory, it's an active prison. It infiltrates every relationship, every choice, every gesture of submission. You accept abuse because you learn to accept scolding in silence. You tolerate absences because you learned early on that complaining about abandonment only led to more abandonment. You believe you have to be good to deserve it because you were taught that those who love only receive if they deserve it. This is the cruelest fantasy, confusing love with control. Childhood trauma becomes the distorted spirituality of adults, where the shadow dictates the rules without you realizing it. How many times have you caught yourself repeating phrases you heard as a child? That's just the way it is. Better not say anything. If I insist, I'll lose. The unconscious doesn't forget. It repeats. It transforms the old wound into a lens through which you see the world, condemning you to relive humiliations that didn't begin with you, but that continue within you. Want to see this in practice? Observe the person who accepts emotional crumbs and gives thanks as if they'd been given a banquet. Observe the adult who humbles themselves to be seen, who swallows pain to avoid losing company, who trades dignity for presence. This isn't a conscious choice, it's a script. It's the wounded child guiding adulthood. It's the shadow commanding, hidden behind the illusion that this time it will be different. But it never is. Because until the script is rewritten, the play remains the same. You repeat the same role. That of the child who begs for crumbs, believing that begging is love. This is the silent trap of trauma. You don't just relive the past, you recreate it, attracting people who reinforce the exact same pain. And each time the scene repeats itself, you sink deeper into the inherited script. But there's something even crueler, when this script mixes with your empathy, creating the trap of infinite understanding, where enduring becomes a prison and you call it love. Empathy is one of the greatest human strengths, but when you offer it without limits, it turns into poison. Carl Jung warned, "The unconscious distorts even virtues, and that's why your understanding, when it knows no bounds, becomes a chain. You believe that to endure is to love, that forgiving endlessly is a sign of spiritual maturity, that understanding each other's wounds will somehow heal them. But this is a prisoner illusion. In practice, the more you endure, the more the other learns to take advantage. Their shadow doesn't read your patience as kindness. It reads it as weakness. Their trauma doesn't interpret your empathy as care, it interprets it as submission. And every time you explain their pain, you bury your own deeper. Spirituality, which should liberate, becomes a shackle. The desire to help becomes a compulsion to sacrifice. And before you know it, you're already in emotional captivity, trapped in a narrative where the other is always the victim and you are always the one who pays the price. This prison has no key because you yourself believe that chains are virtues. The greatest danger of infinite understanding is that it dissolves your boundaries without you even realizing it. You understand the other person so much that you forget to understand yourself. You rationalize aggression, justify absences, explain humiliations. He only acts like this because he suffered too much. She hurts me because she never learned to love. These phrases seem noble, but they hide the illusion that enduring is loving. In truth, enduring the intolerable is not love, it is self-abandonment. And the more you abandon yourself, the more the other person's shadow grows. The dynamic is simple. You nullify yourself. They grow stronger. You swallow. They impose themselves. You suffer in silence. They continue repeating the pattern. The unconscious creates addiction, and you mistake poison for medicine. Your empathy, when used against you, is like a knife without a handle. It cuts just by being held, and each new excuse you give is a shovelful of dirt on your own dignity. This is the labyrinth of infinite understanding. The more you try to save yourself, the more you drown. And the more you believe that to endure is to love speech, the further you get from the truth. Love doesn't require martyrdom. Love without reciprocity is a prison with a pretty name. Do you want to see this trap clearly? Remember the times you justified unforgivable actions because you knew the other person's pain. How many times have you swallowed humiliation, believing that he just doesn't know how to love any other way? How many nights have you cried in silence, only to explain to yourself the next day that the violence was merely a reflection of his wounds? This isn't compassion. This is a fantasy created by the trauma of your childhood, where you learned that being loved meant enduring. And this is where the poison becomes more lethal. The more you understand, the less the other person needs to change. Because they already know that, in the end, you'll always find an excuse. They've already understood that you accept everything as long as you can explain their pain. This prison doesn't have iron bars, but it suffocates as if it did. It's a psychic cell, built by you, maintained by them, and sustained by silence. But no body can bear to carry chains forever. No soul can bear to transform empathy into daily crucifixion. One day you wake up and realize that infinite understanding isn't love, it's the brutal denial of yourself. And when that day comes, silence becomes the only response capable of breaking the cycle. There comes a point where talking is no longer useful. You've explained 1,000 times, you've screamed, you've cried, you've tried to translate your pain into words the other person never wanted to hear. Carl Jung said that the unconscious responds more to silence than to speech, and it's precisely at this point that the turning point is born. Silence isn't giving up, it's strategy, it's sharpened spirituality, it's the shadow losing nourishment. When you stop justifying, arguing, wasting energy, trying to be understood, something happens. The game loses its appeal. Manipulation needs your reaction to exist. Abuse needs your outcry to survive. Their trauma is sustained by your eternal explanation. When you cut off that energy, they're left facing emptiness. And nothing terrifies a manipulator more than being ignored. Silence reveals the absence of power. It shows that you're no longer a stage for the theater of someone else's unconscious. The awakening of silence is brutal because it doesn't announce itself. It simply happens. You don't say, "Enough is enough." You simply remain silent. You don't beg for change. You simply withdraw energy. You don't chase, you don't ask, you don't explain. You learn to let the echo work. And it is in this echo that the other is lost, because the fantasy of control demands your reaction to exist. Without it, everything collapses. Silence is absence, but it is also presence. It is the presence of oneself. It is a reconnection with your own spirituality, with your forgotten dignity, with the part of you that the shadow tried to suffocate. When you remain silent, it is not cowardice, it is courage. It is the cry that needs no sound to be heard. And the most disturbing thing? The other feels it. They feel your absence like a knife, because they always counted on your infinite explanation. And now, faced with emptiness, they see themselves in the mirror of their own wound. Want to feel the practical power of this? Try stopping responding to messages from those who only contact you when they need to drain your energy. Try leaving the room when the manipulations begin. Try not justifying every decision you make, not explaining every step you take, not trying to translate every silence you make. You'll see despair arise. You'll see the mask fall. Because silence exposes what words hid. It dismantles the illusion of control. It breaks the addiction to intermittent reinforcement. It returns to the other what has always eluded them, responsibility for their own shadow. But be careful. Silence is not the absence of action. It is maximum action. It demands discipline. It demands enduring the void. It demands facing one's own pain without filling it with excuses. Awakening silence is the first step toward shadow work, that immersion where you face not only the other's shadow, but your own. The part that also sustained the cycle by believing it could fix those who never wanted to be healed. It's no use simply pointing out someone else's shadow. The real breakthrough begins when you dare to face your own. Carl Jung said that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but rather by making darkness conscious. Shadow work is just that. A brutal dive into the unconscious, where you recognize that you were not just a victim, but an accomplice in a silent cycle. Not by conscious choice, but because your own wounds demanded a stage. The desire to heal the other was, deep down, a desire to heal yourself. The fantasy of "if I hold on, he'll change" wasn't just naive. It was an echo of the inner child begging to finally be seen, loved, validated. And this child hid behind infinite empathy, misunderstood spirituality, and excessive kindness that felt more like anesthesia. Shadow work shatters these illusions. It forces you to admit that part of the prison was built by yourself. When you believed that love had to come through pain, this journey isn't theoretical, it's practical. It's in silence that you begin to see the patterns that have always repeated themselves. Why did you always choose unavailable people? Why did you always accept less than you deserved? Why did you mistake crumbs for banquets? Shadow work exposes these answers without sugarcoating. It shows that your boundless loyalty wasn't love, it was trauma. That your desire to save wasn't altruism, it was delusion. That your infinite patience wasn't spirituality, it was fear. It's looking within and realizing that every wound of yours cried out for companionship, even if that companionship came in the form of abuse. It's admitting that the shadow isn't just in the other, it's in you too, in your compulsion to believe that only by being useful, only by carrying burdens, only by enduring pain, you would have value. And when this recognition arrives, anger gives way to lucidity. Hatred for the other dissolves into clarity about yourself. Want to apply this in a practical way? Grab a notebook and write down all the situations in which you felt you needed to be good enough to be loved. Relive childhood memories. Recall phrases that marked you. Face the faces that taught you that love was conditional. This exercise isn't poetry, it's a scalpel. It exposes how each past abandonment still governs your current relationships. Read books that speak to this journey, such as Carl Jung's Man and His Symbols, to understand how the unconscious constructs masks and roles you don't even realize you're wearing. Practice meditations focused on visualizing your inner child, not to caress it with fantasies, but to hear the anger, the pain, the loneliness it has always tried to silence. This is the journey, descending into the hell of your own trauma, and instead of running away, deciding to look. Because only those who face their own shadow can break the cycle, and it is from this courage that the next step is born, the choice of dignity, the liberation from the compulsion to beg for love, the reconstruction of boundaries that transform pain into awareness. There comes a time when continuing to beg for love is no longer an option. You realize that every time you bow down, you lose a piece of your own soul. Carl Jung said that individuation is becoming who you truly are, and this requires abandoning the illusions that kept you small. Dignity begins when you refuse to trade your worth for crumbs. It's not selfishness, it's psychic survival. It's spirituality in its purest form. It's the courage to look in the mirror and say, I will no longer bleed to feed anyone's shadow. This decision isn't romantic, it's brutal. Because cutting ties that fed your submission hurts. Because setting boundaries after a lifetime of passivity feels like aggression. But this is precisely where true healing begins. When you realize that the love you so desperately sought outside has always been inside, suffocated, waiting for your courage to be freed. Choosing dignity means building internal walls, not to push away love, but to protect what is sacred. It means saying no without fear of loss. It means facing your own loneliness and not giving in to any fantasy just to escape it. It means learning that absence can be healthier than a toxic presence. This courage is rare because it requires you to kill within yourself the child who believed love only came through sacrifice. It's like pulling up old roots, bleeding memories that seemed eternal. But each no you learn to say is a piece of yourself you rescue. Each established limit is a declaration that trauma will no longer write your destiny. The shadow doesn't disappear, but it ceases to command. The unconscious doesn't cease to exist, but it stops dictating the scripts. Spirituality doesn't become anesthesia, but a sword. And in this cut, true individuation is born, transforming pain into awareness, wound into strength, humiliation into wisdom. Want to feel this firsthand? Try distancing yourself from those who only appear to drain your energy. Try cutting off contacts who repeat the same abuse, without offering explanations, without making excuses, simply withdrawing. Try saying no firmly, even if your body trembles. Try investing in yourself. Read Carl Jung. Practice shadow work. Seek therapies that shatter the illusion that you need to carry the world to be loved. Invest in real actions that remind you of your worth, whether it's studying, creating, building something of your own. Dignity isn't born of words, but of choices. It's born when you prove to yourself that you prefer solitude to imprisonment, that you prefer silence to manipulation. that you prefer rebuilding yourself whole rather than living in pieces. This is the rarest courage, not the courage to face the other, but the courage to face yourself and break the compulsion to beg for love. And when you take this step, you discover that individuation isn't a distant ideal. It's real life, pulsing in every boundary you finally learn to draw. And tell me, how many times have you confused love with prison? How many times have you called your wound loyalty? How many times have you swallowed poison believing it was taken care of? A shadow never some. She just waits for the moment when you stop deceiving yourself. And in that moment, who will you choose to be? If this tore you up inside, sign up now, because this was just the first cut.